Hello everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. So this week's weekly roundup might be a little shorter than usual, because my original intent when I was kind of doing the notes for this is I was going to talk about the 1619 Project in this episode. And if you don't know what that is, that's the New York Times new little project / I'm not entirely sure what else to call it, but this kind of overarching thing of different contributions that basically try to reframe the history of America through the lens of slavery. So, like I said, I was originally going to talk about that in this episode, but as I was reading the different contributions and kind of going over my thoughts on it and the things I wanted to say, and also I want to talk about the reactions to the project, I decided that that is going to get its own episode. So that will be the next episode. I will talk about my thoughts on the 1619 Project, my thoughts on people's reactions to it, and also the whole conversation that always seems to come up about libertarians and wanting to talk about race and racism and stuff like that. So that will be next episode, but there are still plenty of things to talk about this episode. So I want to start with Bernie Sanders' great, big, huge, ginormous criminal justice reform plan, which in the vein of every time any of our little socialist friends here want to introduce anything, it can't just be about like one thing or two things or even three things. It has to do all of the things all at the same time, because you can't just break things down for these people. It has to be huge, huge, huge or nothing. So Bernie's plan, which by the way, in its entirety is like a 6,000 word plan, is to eliminate civil asset forfeiture, eliminate cash bail, legalize weed, ban for-profit prisons, improve police oversight, increase spending on public defenders, cut incarceration rates by half, and abolish the death penalty. Like I said, do all of the things at one time, which, okay, I mean, you would probably be better served on a practical level breaking all this up, but here's my thing. At this point in a primary cycle or in an election cycle period, I don't take any candidate's plans as, like, complete, like, seriously and literally. Usually at this point, when somebody's proposing, especially something that's as broad sweeping as that, it's less that you want to pursue this really as actual policy if and when you become either the nominee or the president, but in order to basically make a statement and start a certain conversation. And that's why you see stuff like this. You see Elizabeth Warren releasing all these economic plans. You see people like Julian Castro pushing forth the idea of decriminalizing border crossings. It's not necessarily that you think that you can do these sorts of things if you do become the nominee or president, but you want to put the idea out there that it's a thing that you want to discuss. And so in that vein, I applaud Bernie for putting forth this criminal justice reform plan, because this actually addresses a lot of things that I don't know if the public at large even knows exist. Like, I don't know if the public at large really knows what civil asset forfeiture is, and that, yes, in this country, the police can just, like, take your stuff and then be like, LOL, good luck getting it back. And I don't think a lot of people have sat down and really thought about, like, cash bail and how this disproportionately affects poor people who end up getting incarcerated for longer than they should because they can't make bail. And they can't find somebody to float them bail. So you end up sitting in jail, usually over, like, petty stuff where you being in jail costs the state way, 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 way more than either what they would have made in your bond or the financial impact of whatever it was you did in the first place. Like, I don't know if a lot of people really sit down and think about that sort of thing. And also, the idea of banning for-profit prisons. Yes, I know for-profit prisons are a tiny, tiny, tiny slice of prisons in the United States. But that being said, it's worth thinking about getting rid of private prisons and for-profit prisons, and then maybe from that springboard to a conversation where even in publicly owned prisons, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of incarcerating people, and that is something that we need to look at too. Like, that's even the ones that aren't private, even the ones that aren't set up in that way, there are outside contractors, there's this, that, and the other, people who supply goods and services to prisons who are making a shit ton of money off of incarcerated people, and that's something that needs to be looked at too. And also the ideas of, obviously, we need to improve police oversight, because this is at least a little bit of happy rays have peeked through the clouds on this, especially with the finally the officer who ended up choking Eric Gardner to death got fired, and the NYPD is just so pissed off about it, and it's so beautiful. Honestly, these idiots think that threatening to decrease the amount of arrests they make is going to somehow make people unhappy. Like, what the fuck? You guys suck at boycotting. You're the worst boycotters ever, but I hope the NYPD keeps up that we're going to cut down on arrest boycott, at least until, like, after I leave from being up there in a week or two. If I go up there and I don't see, like, NYPD happily just, like, milling around, I will be very happy. It will be very refreshing, because I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but if you have, that's a fairly common sight, just seeing police people just, like, hanging out, and it's kind of disconcerting. It's like, what? Go away. But that's another thing that obviously we need to look at, and increasing spending on public defenders. I mean, public defenders, God bless them, they do a very, very difficult job, usually under very difficult circumstances. There's not a lot of money in it. These people have insane caseloads. Like, we do need to hire more public defenders. We do need to give them better funding so that they can do the job that they're supposed to do. So that's laudable. And the idea of cutting incarceration rates, I mean, obviously, I'm taking that as Bernie looking seriously at the ideas of maybe taking a lot of these nonviolent crimes, a lot of the things that libertarians bitch about, like taking these nonviolent crimes where people should not be put in cages for them and making them non-cageable offenses. Like, make this a fine, make it community service, make it something else, make it probation, make it parole, make it something where you're not putting people in cages on the state's dime for stupid shit. Like, maybe it's time to start thinking about these sorts of things. And so it's Bernie Sanders. Yes, I know. But occasionally, even the socialists can get it right every now and again. A broken clock is right twice a day. And I think Bernie has done a good thing with, like, releasing this criminal justice reform plan. And hopefully, maybe in future debates or in future, however Democratic candidates are going to engage with each other in the future, whether it be on social media, whether it be in the debates, whether it be in town halls, whether it be wherever, he can start to push some of these ideas, and maybe people can start to educate themselves on these sorts of things and to start really kind of raising awareness of our criminal justice system and the places where it does really need help. It does need to be addressed. It does need to be something that is publicly discussed. So, hooray for Bernie for that. I'm sure he'll do something jackass, and I will go back to hating him. But for right now, okay, Bernie, you did a good thing. Good job. But moving on to the next story that I want to talk about, and that is something that this administration has very infuriatingly decided to call the Flores fix. Now, if you do not know what the Flores Agreement is, let me explain. Let's back up a little bit. In 1997, after about a decade of different legal cases and settlements and things like that, basically the Flores Agreement codified how minors are treated in immigration detention facilities in this country. It stipulates that they are to be kept at a certain level of care that is considered safe and sanitary, which, side note, and just to show how little this administration gives a shit about the Flores Agreement to begin with, people had to actually go sue the federal government to get them to acknowledge the fact that under safe and sanitary arrangements, that includes things like adequate bedding and toothbrushes and showers, which this administration was trying to deny immigrant children, these migrant children that are being held in facilities, by saying that that doesn't count as part of safe and sanitary. Clearly, they lost that case, because that is absolutely freaking insane. But back to the Flores Agreement. It stipulates that obviously they are supposed to be kept at a certain level of care. They are to be taken out of detention as quickly as humanly possible and placed with somebody, whether it be parents, other family members, somebody that, say, if the parent is also in detention, they can authorize that their child go to somebody. Or if nobody can be found, these children can be placed in foster homes, which that's a whole nother ball of wax. There's been problems with that. But basically, the Flores Agreement is put in place to protect immigrant children who are in detention facilities, to make sure that they do have this minimum amount of treatment and that they are processed out as fast as possible. Now, I will take a brief side note here and say that ORR, which is the agency that is responsible for taking care of these immigrant children and getting them placed out, has been put in a very, very difficult position due to the family separation policy that was in place last year and earlier this year. And also the fact that even though the family separation policy has been struck down, it has been ruled that you can't do that, family separations are still happening at a very rapid rate. It's just now the government has to actually come up with an excuse to do it other than we want to, and using Flores as an excuse, because that was the excuse for family separation, was that, well, we can't keep your kids with you, so we have to separate them. And as if that was the only option and there aren't other options available. So, anyway, that is the basic kind of outline of the Flores Agreement. So, what the administration wants to do now is basically throw that in the trash and allow for families to be kept together, but to be held indefinitely together, which still doesn't fix the main problem of keeping minor children in detention indefinitely. Logistically speaking, there's only 3 facilities in the United States that are equipped to house families. Usually in detention facilities, we separate them out into adults and minors, the same way we do in our criminal justice system. You have detention centers for juveniles, you have detention centers for adults, for obvious reasons. Like, you're catering to a different crowd of people. You can't just have children intermingling with adults. Like, it doesn't work that way. So, logistically speaking, I don't know how you would even begin to do this, but legally and theoretically speaking, you're still putting them in this situation where you are holding a minor. And mind you, I know, and I've stressed this before, the immigration system is not part of the criminal justice system, not the way that we, like, criminal and civil. It kind of exists in its own weird place where it's very Kafkaesque, and there's not a lot of rights that you have as somebody in that system outside of the fact that if you're in the United States, you are protected by the U.S. Constitution, and so you do have certain rights. And one of those is due process. And you can't hold anybody, honestly, indefinitely without either charging them with a crime or letting them go. You most certainly can't do it to a person who you can't charge with a crime, as in a minor. Like, you can't charge a small child with a crime. So therefore, you shouldn't be able to hold them indefinitely. Like, it makes no sense from a legal standpoint. So I don't understand where they think that this is going to work out. And again, this is one of those where I'm sure it's going to be struck down by a judge. It's going to be ruled as unlawful. But again, it's the fact that we have to keep doing this. Like, it feels like every damn week there's another thing that this administration tries to throw at a wall in immigration to see if it'll stick. I mean, I would hope that somebody told them that this is probably not going to pass legal muster, but they still do it. And as it stands right now, this is supposed to go into effect 60 days after it was publicly announced. So we'd probably be looking at like the end of October where this would go into effect, where families could be held together, but also held indefinitely. And will it, maybe there will be a legal challenge that will strike it down before then. I certainly hope so. But again, it's another one of those things where it's like, how many times do we have to do this? Like, how many times do we have to go over the fact that it's cruel? Like, the cruelty is the point. I know that, but it's just, it's getting to be completely out of control. And for what it's worth, the Trump administration tried to sell this as, oh, this is our way of protecting children, of trying to keep them with their families. And of course, we don't actually plan on detaining anybody indefinitely. And then Ken Cuccinelli, who is ostensibly the head of USCIS, which is Customs and Immigration Services, which is the paper-pushing wing of our immigration policy, our immigration system in this country, but for some reason is now, I guess, the spokesperson for all of the immigration arms and all of the immigration, like, federal organizations in this country, came out and said, yeah, it's meant to be a deterrent. It's like, you just blew a whole week's worth of messaging out of Team Trump, trying to spin this as somehow humane and a humanitarian way of trying to deal with this problem. Good job, jackass. But this goes back to take it kind of back to how things were handled before the Trump administration, especially when you're talking about things like catch and release. There's a reason why things were done the way they were done. The Flores Agreement is part of the reason why. If you come here and you have a small child, you can't be held in just indefinite detention. Your child cannot be held in those situations. So usually they would present themselves, they'd process out, they'd get their court date, and then they would be released. That's what catch and release was. There was a reason that we did it that way. And by and large, it worked out pretty damn well. And even at the end of the Obama administration, they were testing out a pilot program where basically it wouldn't be the same way as, like, you get assigned like a public defender, like you would if you went through the criminal justice system and you couldn't afford a lawyer, you get a public defender. Basically what they were doing is processing these families and then releasing them and assigning them a caseworker who did kind of part of what a lawyer does in these sorts of situations, whereas the caseworker would explain the process to the asylum seekers and basically kind of hold their hand through the process, make sure they make it to court, make sure they have everything they need, make sure all their paperwork's in order, all of that good stuff. And that program had a 99% success rate of people going to court. Unfortunately, it was not left in place long enough to really go all the way through, and so that we could get a success rate as far as actually achieving asylum or achieving refugee status. But there are other ways of handling this. Like, there's ways where you can release people with ankle monitors, where you can track them, which again, that's still not great. And there's a lot of kind of fuckery going on with that too. I saw an article where there's one county in Arizona that does this, but then they charge the people who have the ankle monitors $400 a month, basically, for the privilege of having the ankle monitors, which is a lot of money, especially if you're like here and technically you're not supposed to be working, which I discussed that. Did I discuss that in the last episode? Our new plans of keeping people who are here technically legally through asylum and not giving them the work permits. Basically, the new plan is to keep these people from being able to apply for a work permit for a year after being here, which again, what the hell are you supposed to do? If you're here and you can't work, I mean, you're either going to work under the table or you're going to try to get welfare benefits illegally. Like, it's so mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing, the dumb shit that we do on immigration policy in this country right now. But this is just another one where it's like, I have faith that it's not going to go into effect, but maybe it will. And just the fact that they think that this is a good idea to try this is bad. So we shall see what ends up with that. I will cross my fingers and toes that hopefully we do not become a country where we think that it is somehow okay to just keep minors in detention indefinitely, or keep anybody in detention indefinitely, Like, that's just, it's so insane. Like, I don't even understand where people think that this is a good idea. But moving on to the last topic I want to talk about, and that is our new tariff situation. Since it's been a minute since I've talked about tariffs, let me try to catch you up a little bit on what's going on and what is going to be happening going forward. Back earlier this month, Trump had announced that tariffs on certain goods would be suspended until, I think it would be the end of October. Either the end of September or the end of October, basically to allow for retailers to make their holiday orders and not have tariffs on specific holiday goods, like basically to avoid trying to jack up prices during the Christmas rush, basically. So that happened, but that didn't apply to everything under the sun. So the things that did not get the tariff exemptions, tariffs will be increasing on those on September 1st. Initially, it was supposed to be a 10% tariff on these goods. And mind you, this is going to be a little different than the tariffs that we've seen previously, because the tariffs previously were usually on either like raw materials or finished goods that you don't necessarily buy on a regular basis, like kind of like big ticket items that you're not buying them like on a regular basis. You're not buying them like once a year or twice a year. I mean, these things that you might buy like once every 5 years. So those haven't super duper affected pricing on the consumer level yet. These ones that are going to go into effect and are going to be at a 15% tariff are on finished goods that we will see price increases on almost immediately. They are finished consumer goods. Here's, one of the problems. These new tariffs that are going to go into effect on September 1st apply to everything that is not in the country and spoken for, picked up by August 31st. So that means things that have already been ordered, things that are already in the process of being made, being shipped. Obviously, these contracts have already been negotiated. The pricing's already been negotiated. Now, the end retailers are going to have to figure out a way to deal with this all of a sudden 15% increase in cost. And I know 15% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about items where the margins are very, very small profit-wise to begin with, where you make your money in selling them in bulk, that's a killer. Like, that hurts. So now what's going to end up happening is you're going to have these small and medium-sized businesses who, I mean, if you've already put in your order, like, there's nothing you can do. You can't go back and renegotiate prices. And even for orders going forward, where you can still negotiate prices, from what I've seen anecdotally, people who are ordering from their suppliers in China, like, they're able to negotiate maybe a 2 to 3% sort of wiggle room to cover for tariffs. Obviously, that's not covering 15%. So no matter what, the cost of those goods is going to go up. So now you have a problem as a business. Like, what do you do to offset these costs? Because businesses don't absorb costs. Like, everybody knows this. Costs get passed on to the consumer. Any cost that is incurred in the production of an item gets passed on to the consumer in the final price. Everybody knows this. Yeah, I mean, it's the most basic of economic knowledge to know that. And when you are ordering certain goods, you're ordering your finished goods, as a retailer, you need to know what that cost is. You need to know what your production costs are so that you can price your final goods accordingly so that you can make your profit, because that's how this works. Like, this is a capitalist society, marginally. I know, don't at me. But, I mean, you need to know these sorts of things when you're running a business. And so now you have this situation where, especially with it going from 10 to 15%, a lot of small and medium businesses are starting to panic, because now they've got to figure out, it's getting to that point where that's an amount where now all of a sudden you have to figure out, okay, do I raise my prices? Do I cut back on my labor? Do I put off certain launches? Do I put off even opening a business altogether because now I have these extra costs? And that's another thing. Like, if you're thinking about opening a business and you're ordering anything from China, and you're ordering your finished goods, you're ordering supplies to make finished goods in the United States, because obviously manufacturing is a thing. Manufacturing machines have to come from somewhere. Usually they come from China. So now, if that's going to cost more money, now what do you do? And just the idea that all of a sudden, like just via tweet, Trump can completely upend supply chains and just really screw up the economy is scary as hell. That is frightening. But here we are, and who the hell knows? And now these businesses, like, okay, it was 10%, now it's 15%. Who knows? Maybe he'll get a wild hair up his ass tomorrow and say it's 20%. Who fucking knows? And how the hell are you supposed to run a business that way? Like, you can't, like, it's going to end up affecting consumers. Because, I mean, you're going to pay this money. Like, China does not pay the tariffs. Consumers pay the tariffs. Everybody knows this. Tariffs are taxes. So, how much things are going to cost next month? I don't know. Nobody knows. Who knows? But it's going to affect the U.S. economy. And in a moment where people are starting to really side-eye the economy and wonder if we are going to go into a recession sometime in the nearest future, raising prices on consumer goods no, that's bad. That's really bad. Like, that's going to accelerate whatever bad things might possibly be on the horizon. Raising prices on consumers is certainly not going to help. Like, whether we do end up having a recession, whether we don't, it's not going to be. Trade wars are not good, and they're not easy to win. Let's put it that way. And even the Trump administration has moved away from saying that the trade wars are good and easy to win. Now the message is more, well, guys, this is going to suck, and it's going to be painful, and it's probably going to take a long time, but you guys are just going to have to suck it up and be good little troopers. And it's like, go fuck yourself. Stop it. We didn't have to do this in the first place. And now that it's finally maybe going to cost you something, now you want to try to wrap this up in some kind of like patriotic campaign to do God knows what. It's like, no, we never had to do this. It's something, again, like our immigration situation, it's entirely of Trump's making. Nobody had to do this. We did not have to go down this road, but now here we are, everything to clusterfuck, and it's one man's fault. It's one person's fault. That is insane. Insane when you think about it. Like, oh my God, can we please just stop having presidents? Let's abolish. Let's just stop having presidents until we can figure out what the hell's going on. But the last thing I kind of want to talk about is the Trump tweet. And this, he tweeted out that he hereby declares that American businesses need to find a way to move their manufacturing to the U.S. Yes, the man said that with a straight face. And yes, I know, technically speaking, he has the power to do that. I know the Emergency Economic Powers Act exists, and if anybody wants to talk about loopholes that get exploited and need to be closed by Congress, there's one for you right there. Because again, one man can demand that people completely upend their supply chains. And just like now, just do it now, like right now. Like, and that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. It's insane. Like, there's somebody running very important parts of the American economy, the immigration system, basically how things work in this country, who has no fucking clue how any of this works. And either, like, doesn't take the time to think about the consequences, or doesn't care, or knows about them and is happy about them. Who the hell knows at this point? But it's frightening. And I think a lot of people are starting to kind of look at the presidency and the amount of power that has been consolidated into the presidency over the past couple of decades and be like, oh man, maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe we should do something about that. And it's like, yes, maybe we should do something about that. Congress, maybe do something, take part of your job back from this insane person who can't figure out how to do anything correctly? Maybe. I don't know. But at least it's starting to make people think that, hey, maybe we've allowed the executive branch to get a little too powerful. And maybe, I don't know, somebody should look into that. And the libertarians are just over here like, yeah, we've been saying that for 50 years. Hi, what's up? We're over here. But anyway, at this point, I want to go ahead and wrap this up because I did cover everything I wanted to cover in this. And like I said, I will do the next episode on the 1619 project. So there will be a lot of discussion in that particular episode about that project and the reactions to it. So I will go ahead and wrap this one up. As always, if you did make it this far, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. Take care, and until next time.